I just cut open every Air Jordan flagship model ever, spanning 5 decades. This is by far the most insane evolution of a shoe line you will ever see. Not just for the evolution of the shoe technology, but for how at some points it seems like it devolved, whether or not from trying too hard or at times maybe not trying hard enough. Because I think we've all seen what the Air Jordan 40 has in store, but what if I told you there was another version of that shoe that took actual inspiration from the 40 years of Jordans? But we'll get to that one later, because first things first. Let's get to the granddaddy of them all, the Air Jordan 1. When the Air Jordan released in 1985, it may as well have been like looking at the space shuttle for the first time. That's how advanced these were compared to what else was out there. Right now, I know we look at these and yeah, this is my pair of lost and founds that took it on the chin for this video. But you look at these now and you think of like the quintessential retro. But in 85, when you get an air unit in the rear foot and honestly this much polyurethane in the rear foot too. I mean, I know in the forefoot, it is crazy to see. There's literally nothing there between you and the ground. But compared to the gold standard back then, which was Converse, which was what all the other superstars were wearing, you're not even playing the same game. I think one of the most interesting things about the ones is, it has nothing to do with performance or technology, is that it's the only one with the giant Nike swoosh on it. None of the other ones have it. In my mind though, the thing that holds up the best in the Jordan 1 is the tread. I mean, even against today's standards, these aren't the worst gripping shoes out there. They're also definitely not the best, but they're not the worst. And that is also really saying something for a shoe this old. You got the radial pattern here under like a bullseye right under the big toe, and it just radiates out. Then you got some flex grooves there, which actually span out further laterally, right on the outside of the foot. It kind of gets wider, which is really intuitive. I mean, in terms of how the shoe flexes. And like I said, even though, yeah, the air sole, huge, I mean, just crazy leap forward in shoe tech compared to what came before it. But to me, I think the biggest marvel of these shoes, like I said, is the tread. Air Jordan 2. So the Air Jordan 2, I feel like is one of these shoes that history judges a lot more favorably than what was actually happening in the day. When these came out, these were not as well received. As we get further and further and further along, people start to give these the accolades that they deserve. Remember, there is no Nike swoosh on this. Like we ditched the Nike swoosh after one line, and that's because these ones, they really boasted these were designed in Italy, designed to be, you could wear these as a dress shoe as well as a basketball shoe. And we know even from today how hard it is to make a shoe look like one thing and make it perform like another. Look at the Nike Book 1. Honestly, Nike did a better job in '86 with these. You look at the midsole, and to me, the 2s were a bigger leap forward from the 1s than the 1s were from everything that predated it. Got the full-length air sole, or near full-length air sole, and you got polyurethane that goes all the way underneath of it. So the cushion system was far and beyond what the 1s were with what they were trying to do. Like I said, make this look like a premium shoe, or you could wear it as a premium shoe plus as a basketball shoe. I think history will keep judging this shoe better and better and better as we get further and further along. And when you look further and further along in the line, when you see the one shoe that harkens back to this one, it is pretty crazy what an updated version of the 2 looks like. We'll get to that later. The Air Jordan 3, I think this is where the hype really started, to be honest, even more than the 1. And that's because you get the Jumpman logo for the first time. You see visible air in these things for the first time. The elephant print, I mean, really everything about these was just kind of the launching point for the cultural significance of the Jordan line. To me, though, seeing how fat the air unit is in the heel, as well as you see what basically got in the rear foot of the 1, now in the forefoot of the 3, it just shows you how much more they're putting into the midsole. The choice of lace eyelets that you can use, to me, that is just as revolutionary as anything else, because now you're starting to get into being able to customize your own fit in a shoe. Actually getting a better lockdown, I think, is just such a awesome addition to the shoe. Air Jordan 4. What you're gonna see in this video is that there's some points in the Air Jordan line where it's a huge revolution in shoes. Others, it's just a little bit more evolution. The 4 is really just a slight evolution from the 3. And you can see in the uppers, more choices for lace eyelets. Now you get it in the rear foot as well as in the forefoot. You get all the netting and caging in there. And then in the midsole, still enormous air unit in the rear foot, and then another one in the forefoot. It still is polyurethane. The tread, though, is where I think the micro revolution came in these, where we're starting to introduce pods of herringbone. More, I would say, fine-tuned grip for the footwork you're starting to see now in the NBA that Michael Jordan largely pioneered. The Air Jordan 5. Can you immediately spot the thing that a lot of companies now still copy from the Jordan line? The Air Jordan 5's lateral ankle collar is lower than the medial side. We still see this in basketball and tennis shoes, pickleball shoes too, volleyball shoes today, because trying to get more contained medially while dropping weight, giving it a little bit more freedom of movement laterally. What I see in the 5s is really a mixture of the 4s and the 1s. I think what the coolest thing about this is it's more revolution from the 1, evolution of the 4s. It doesn't look like a lot, but when you start taking this as an aggregate from the 1 now to the 5, you start to see where the major leaps come and where the smaller leaps come. All right, Air Jordan 6. Number 1, the tongue looks like this is like what Batman looks through in his cowl. You know, obviously that wasn't the inspiration from it, although, you know, Michael Keaton Batman had come out around then. Still get almost the exact same midsole as coming from before. The outsole tread, though, I think is what really kind of starts to maybe take on a little bit of a over-engineering type look. You get this super thick outsole rubber, and it's basically just pock marks all the way through it. These are the ones, to me at least, looking backwards, that like fail easier. Yeah, they look crazy and they look really interesting. With the benefit of hindsight, though, this is where I can see maybe one of the first aspects of the Jordan line where it was a reach. And yeah, it's awesome, you know, trying something new, but this is where I could see simpler may have been a little bit better. All right, if you're looking for what has to be the most 90s looking shoe ever, I'll look no further than the Air Jordan 7. The two things, though, that were revolutionary about the 7, number 1 was the slipper tongue on the inside. It's a booty liner, it's a one piece. And you still see shoes companies bragging about this today. Jordan was doing it in 91. But the thing that I think also was the biggest leap in these is you now get a shank in this shoe. So top-loaded air, then polyurethane, and then actually a pretty long shank spans the rear foot into the midfoot. My knife did not get through these. These are old shoes. My knife got through everything else pretty well. That shank is still holding up strong. The looks of it, evolution, the actual tech and performance, this was one of the sneaky revolutionary Jordans. Air Jordan 8. Now these are immediately recognizable from the cross straps. Yeah, you get the same inner booty liner or Huarache. Is that, yeah, we're still going with the pockmark, really thick outsole tread. But what you also notice is this huge polycarbonate plate underneath of there. It's thin and flexible, but it's so big and wide that it still gives a ton of side-to-side containment and support. And even from just one model year to the next, you're seeing Nike start to really experiment with the Jordan brand and just what they can do with almost the same exact silhouette of shoes, but start to interchange different parts of the midsole and the uppers. Okay, I'm gonna pose a question to you and I want you to remember this question later in the video. Is simpler better? Look at the 9s, and we went from the insanity, right, we got to in the 8s, all this new different technology. And then in the 9s, it's actually pretty simple. You get 2 air soles, polyurethane, some molding here in terms of like a carrier foam of polyurethane. And then the outsole tread is largely just flat with what Nike said was symbols from Michael Jordan's influence across the world. This, interestingly enough, this kind of gets to what I say, that a lot of times doesn't matter what the traction is, if the outsole tread pattern is in a basketball shoe, as long as it's multi-directional. Here you go. This one actually was pretty flat, but like I said, it does have the sock liner in it, so we are carrying that over. But this one, pretty simple, almost looks like a Timberland boot. So think about this later, you know, starting with the 9. Is simpler better? Air Jordan 10, otherwise known as one of the simplest looking Air Jordan shoes, but is also hiding underneath of it the biggest revolution in sneaker technology, maybe in any era ever for any sport. And that is switching from polyurethane now to Nike Phylon, which is EVA. And as we know, shoes nowadays are still being made of EVA, pretty similar materials to this. Now that might be an issue when we get further on down the line. Now, the other thing you also get into this is in the uppers. You get elastic bands that go across the lace line. Now versus what we saw in the 8s with the buckles that kind of helped you lock the shoe down, this is a much more simple and elegant design. So you're still not just relying on the tie down of the laces. There is a fail safe there, but like I said, it's much simpler. The outsole tread to me, yeah, it's one of the worst. I gotta say, it's one of the worst. To me, this is an ice skate waiting to happen, to be honest. So yeah, I like the break points because it is such thick rubber. But to me, the real fireworks of this, like I said, comes on the cellular level, comes from switching from the old school polyurethane midsoles, and now we're getting into modern day foam. Now, if you don't immediately recognize the Air Jordan 11 when you see it, honestly, that is impressive that you have been able to avoid seeing Air Jordan 11, especially the year they did the cool gray. This one to me is the oldest Air Jordan that still holds up today. You can still put it on today. Still, I think it'd still be just fine. You do get Phylon in the midsole, top-loaded air sole, but then also look at the carbon fiber shank. It spans from the rear foot, kind of almost into the forefoot, has some cutouts in there, so it's not super stiff. It still has some flex, so it's not uncomfortable. Then it's also molded on the arch. Now you're starting to see some more customization, some molding. The tread, we finally gotten back to herringbone, back to the simpler treads that work. And you see that tread going all the way up underneath of the big toe for a little bit more tactile sensation. Definitely one of the candidates for best Air Jordan ever. I will tell you at the end of the video which one I actually think is the best one. I do think there is a best one ever. I'll let you know at the end. I want you to let me know which one you think is the best too at the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, which one you think is the very best. But wait till the end of the video until you see all of them to make a judgment, because when you see them all in a row, it definitely makes you think differently than versus seeing releases come out here and there. The Air Jordan 12 actually has a few things in common with the Air Jordan 2. Number one, it's got that same premium dress shoe slash basketball shoe look. Another thing is it was a revolution in midsole technology from the Air Jordan 2 jumping up from the 1, and now the 12 going with a, full-length Zoom Air unit. You also get that carbon fiber shank underneath of it, although much more solid than the 11s. Put a little more of a simpler herringbone on the bottom. But in the 12s, this is where we start to see the Zoom Air revolution start, and it started big, top-loaded, full-length Zoom. Air Jordan 13, and still one of my favorite outsole tread patterns ever. That is the paw print on the bottom. Just everything about it, the way they're able to make a little bit of a lateral flange out of the shape of the paw print, the different pods of herringbone in it, making it also actually a little bit more of a nimble shoe. Instead of a full-length top-loaded Zoom, you get rear foot and forefoot Zoom. Yeah, the uppers are, they're kind of an evolution from the 12s, maybe just a little bit more streamlined than the 12s, but it's that outsole tread on the 13s that I still think is one of the better tread patterns even today. And from the 13s, coming directly out of left field, comes the Air Jordan 14s, which were inspired by Michael Jordan's Ferrari. But it's the shank on these ones to me that is just absolutely wild. It's like plastic plus a little bit of metal in it. It's crazy. It's not the heaviest thing on the planet either, which I thought was just fascinating. The midsole, pretty much the same as the 13s. You get rear foot plus forefoot Zoom. And then kind of the lace line of these, the cuff, is really similar to the 13s too. But to me, it's the shank that I'm not sure exactly what materials they blended into there, but as it gets worn, it looks more and more like metal, like paint chipping off of metal, which to me, that's pretty interesting. The look of them, yeah, it's pretty slick, but yeah, it's a much different looking shoe now that we're seeing from the 13s. And we're gonna start to see that where you start to see just these wild transitions in silhouettes of Jordans. And it starts right here. They say the design inspiration for the Air Jordan 15 was the X15 Jet. What I see in these is like a purse from like the 1960s with like all the leather basket weaving in these. These ones are clunky. I mean, exact opposite of the 14. These things are bulky, big. Yeah, they've got the booty liner or the slock tongue, the slipper tongue, whatever you want to call it. The midsole is, it's still Phylon. You still kind of getting the exact same thing. you do get a shank here in the middle, this like middle carbon fiber shank. And then it's like just a very thin piece of plastic on the outside. It looks like a big bulky shank here on the outside. It's just a very thin piece of plastic. What I noticed about the 15 though, which is crazy, is how big the lateral flange is on these things, how molded and big it is from the midsole. So this is, I mean, honestly, this is fantastic here. But just from the 14 to the 15, how different they went. Big swings in silhouettes. Air Jordan 16, otherwise known as the Shroud. These things had a button and Velcro shroud around it, like a magnetized button here. And then that had a little rubberized piece that went around the outsole tread. Mine has busted off, it's so old. And it kind of was like the male to the female part here. Now the outsole tread also flattened out in the forefoot, almost like a dress shoe. Did have some herringbone in there, but then had just these rolled kind of triangular patterns, which I thought was an interesting idea. Also is in the midsole, we're introducing blow molded air, which is these big continuous air units in the rear foot. Then you've got forefoot zoom. Funny enough, in these ones, the shank that I cut open on these, still intact. I mean, really, my knife did not want to go through it, just like a brand new shoe. The foam around them though, disintegrating everywhere. The carbon fiber is still intact. You see these on a lot of Jordan shoes I have where I still could not get through the carbon fiber shank. And these shoes are very, very old and that carbon fiber is still holding strong. So, whereas plastic to form over time, but maybe not will just crack like that. Whereas carbon fiber, as long as you don't get a crack in it, still good. The Air Jordan 17, otherwise known as the Shroud Light. These things also had a shroud. It was a little bit more elastic and it buckled into the shoe this time. It didn't have that strap underneath of it. So yeah, maybe not as much failure. You still had the blow molded air in the rear foot and then the zoom air in the forefoot. The tread, maybe a little bit more strategic on these, kind of went all the way through the shoe with the herringbone. These ones are a little bit more, I would say, streamlined versus the 16. They also came with the briefcase and yeah, they also came with a CD-ROM. The other thing they also have is still an intact shank. Air Jordan 18, otherwise known as the heaviest shoe ever. Number one, also took design inspiration from dress shoes. Number two, this one's got double stacked zoom air in the rear foot because it's got a full length zoom up top. Then that double stack in the rear foot. Also alternating colors on the zoom, which I thought was pretty cool. The other thing that these things introduced was carbon fiber in the insole, which to me is, I don't know if I want that right underfoot. Interesting idea though, which, like I said, pushing some technology, which I really like. These things though, which is how much material is in them, you start sweating in these things. The heat and the weight of all that moisture, insane. Okay, so the Air Jordan 19 was weird. Yeah, so the shroud on these ones, keep talking about shrouds on these shoes, this was made of a material called TechFlex. Now this was often used to wrap hydraulic lines in cars or wrap cables like for electronics that needed to be protected against heat or chemicals or those things. And actually cutting through it was really, really difficult. You can kind of see it flexes with the shoe, it moves every which way. It really was interesting. It reminds me of like the wicker in like your grandfather's like outdoor chair. So midsole, top loaded zoom again, full length, and you got the double stack in the rear foot. And then on the outsole tread, it kind of looks like the TechFlex. It's almost like a mirror image of it on there. The laces are really thin. And yeah, you basically use this tab to close them down. So if that fails and you got to tie these little things. But once again, yeah, they're there. They're interesting. This released. Remember the Air Jordan 10 and how a little simpler on the outside, but then the revolutionary technology was from going from polyurethane to EVA to Nike Phylon? Well, that was in 1995, and 10 years later in 2005, we've got the Air Jordan 20. And these ones are not as subtle for another decade of innovation. Number one, you've got this independent ankle collar here on the top, which that's there. And then you do have a dorsal retention strap, which is actually doing something. Then in the outsole tread, really, really sharp lateral flange, but then you also have these circular outcroppings of tread, of herringbone, which act as kind of like wobble boards. So it's trying to make the shoe a little bit more shifty, a little bit easier to get from side to side. It's also going to decrease the stability of the shoe. That's why the lateral flange on these is so steep, why it's so sharp, because it kind of has to be with how otherwise unstable the shoe is. that's not all that makes the shoe unstable, because now we've gone from Phylon to IPS, which stands for independent podular suspension, which means you have these alternating pods of foam in the shoe going from, more dense to less dense Phylon. You do have a rear foot air unit that is there, and then a top loaded shank, which is more of a composite, so it's much more flexible and easier to cut through for me, thank goodness. But as you can see, the alternating colors of foam are also alternating densities of foam. So in these ones, yeah, I mean, that was at the time a pretty crazy leap forward, but also the outside of these shoes, the silhouette, was also kind of matched the insanity going on underneath. All right, now the Air Jordan 21 took what the Air Jordan 20 did, kind of slap a little bit more of the design inspo from the Air Jordan 14, and took that IPS, an independent podular suspension, and just took it up another notch. And they introduced an actual interchangeable, full interchangeable part of the midsole, which is rear foot with the Air. Now you also get IPS in terms of different foams. In the forefoot, as you can see with those white foams, and that did correspond to the areas of treads. You could actually see it through the shoe. You also have these pods of tread, kind of like in the 20, yeah, making the shoe a little bit more shifty, easier to transition, but you better have a pretty big lateral flange on these things to keep them just a little bit stable. Now these kind of ditched the more subtle shank of the 20s to then put, once again, a very thin carbon fiber, massive shank that also gives a ton of arch support. Interestingly enough, you will also see this configuration here on the lateral side and medial side of the shoe, this design, pop up in the years to come again, and in a much different way though. But undeniably, the design inspo was the 21. We'll see that later. All right, thank goodness the Air Jordan 22 completely crumbled as I tried to cut it open, because there was no way I was getting through this metal composite shank underneath of it. The 22 also's got the IPS. Once again, you can interchange the zoom on it. These started, once again, starting to look like dress shoes again. As you go into the midsole, these ones a little bit more basic, except for the rear foot IPS. You could interchange the rear foot, but you did have a big toe joint only zoom pod right there, like that pad right there. The outsole tread actually did like really big, broad arrows in terms of tread. These ones, like I said, a little bit simpler design, but still seeing that interchangeable system in the rear foot. So the Air Jordan 23, these ones were Jordan's namesake, right? His number. And yeah, it's got a terraced lateral flange. That was pretty cool. And the outsole tread, I think to me is the thing that is the most interesting part of the shoe, is you're starting to see a more thin, rippled tread, because this is what we're still seeing now with basketball shoe treads being very thin, a little more nimble type tread. And we're seeing this back in 2008. These ones, massive carbon fiber shank, like a lot of the other Jordans, and then top-loaded Air, top-loaded Zoom Air. So yeah, ironically, one of the simpler Jordans for a shoe that, to me, is kind of, number 23. All right, the Air Jordan 24, otherwise known as definitely one of the Air Jordans that should never be put on a basketball court. And you can kind of see just the high heel on these things. I mean, once again, inspiration from dress shoes. At this point, though, we're starting to get into maybe not a basketball shoe. I mean, yeah, it's got a lateral flange as well as a medial flange on these. Man, they needed it for how unstable that rear foot is. But as I'm sure you've noticed as a theme in this video, there are things hiding underneath the silhouette. And in these ones, you have the articulated propulsion system, otherwise known as articulated zoom. So now you've got little break points in the zoom so that it can bend, kind of like now we see with Zoom Turbo. So yeah, even though the silhouette of these shoes and the shape of them, I don't think really should be on a basketball court, you are seeing the beginnings of modern day Zoom. It's almost as if in the next model year, someone at Nike said, maybe we should go back to making these look like basketball shoes. And that's what you've got in the Air Jordan 25. Ironically, another offset ankle collar, just like in the Air Jordan 5. So 20 years after that one, you get a lot of the same characteristics of the 5s and these ones. You got the meshing here on the medial and lateral side. Maybe not much of a mesh, maybe like a plastic air window, I guess you should say. And then going on the outsole tread, you're seeing thin pods of herringbone, big lateral flange. And then in the midsole, you're seeing a pretty typical composite shank, double stacked air in the rear foot, bottom loaded full length or almost full length zoom. Interestingly enough though, there is some phylon between those two air units. So a lot of time they just stack them on top of each other. You didn't get the articulated zoom that, their quote unquote propulsion system, but to me, a much more complete shoe in the 25 versus the 24. All right, so you may or may not know there's a company out there called Serious Player Only, and they will interchange the drop-in midsoles of their shoes, and everyone goes crazy for it because they're really the only ones doing it. Well, the Air Jordan 26 back in 2011 was doing the same thing. And in this case, now we're introducing Cushlon, which is an evolution from Phylon. Now we go from just straight EVA. Now we got a rubberized EVA, which is a little bit lighter, more airy, just maybe a little bit more bouncy, soft, and plush. Now, this came with two different drop-ins. One was blue, one was red. Now, this has carbon fiber on it, a lot of like today's more premium drop-in midsole you see with Way of Wade or Serious Player Only. You also have an air sole unit in here. So yeah, the Air Jordan 26 to me, pretty basic on the outside, but on the inside, that's where all the craziness, that's where all the technology happens, especially going from Phylon to Cushlon, which if you go look up any other Nike shoe right now, what are most of the signatures being made of? Cushlon, Cushlon 2.0 or 3.0. Now the Air Jordan 27 took what they did in the 26 and just ran with it, just took the leap. You can actually take the entire booty liner or sock liner out of the shoe. And then you've got different options in terms of the drop-in. There's the fly through, the fly over, and then the fly around. The fly over is 4-foot zoom and then an air sole unit in the heel. The fly through is just a full-length air sole, and the fly around's got the 4-foot zoom air. Now, mine, what I think is actually pretty cool in these things too, is that the colors are just absolutely wild. So they look pretty cool too. And like I said, in these ones too, you got the glued-in insole on the top. So as long as it stayed glued down, you were okay. These also had some fly wire on them too. So they had cabling here in the uppers of the shoe. They had the flight carbon on the bottom, which was just, honestly, it wasn't the thickest carbon fiber you get, but it was also very broad. Then you get into this more kind of checker pattern in the tread of this thing, where you got small treads alternating with larger ones, and then they're tilted on each other. So you get multi-directional traction inside of multi-directional traction. Like everything about this was just a gigantic leap. They just threw everything at you with this one. And even the bottom of the sock liner matched the outsole. That's how much attention to detail was taken in this shoe. Definitely a clunker. It's big, it's bulky, there's a lot going on, but as someone who just loves performance shoes and shoe technology, this one also could be my #1 favorite. We'll see. If you had a pair of Air Jordan 28s, I want to know, did you wear them all the way up, or did you kind of do the half zip and put them down? Let me know if you had them. But that brings me to the Air Jordan 28, and a lot of similarities from the 27 in terms of, the high collar, right? Like these are real high top. But once you actually take down the shroud, actually is more of a basic shoe under there. You do get integrated lace eyelets, but yeah, as wild as these things looked from the outside, it's what's on the inside that's the real marvel in these things. #1, you've got the flight plate, which is the shank that incorporated Pebex into it. So honestly, to me, it looks like it was carbon fiber woven with Pebex, at least to my eye, but you can see the Pebex component of that. Then in the 4-foot, big chunky zoom unit, in the rear foot, big chunky zoom unit, really nothing there in the midfoot. It's all that Pebex flight plate in there. And, we don't see that in shoes now. So I think they were trying to get that compromise between the stiffness and the longevity of carbon fiber, but with the compliance of Pebex. Then the 4-foot, you'll see the segmented or articulated zoom pods as well in the 4-foot. And then the tread, you're starting to see now more linear bands of tread. And like I said, this is where we start to see a lot more, of the modern treads going as well. Even though on the outside, yeah, these are super flashy. Like I said, it's on the inside, it really counts. Air Jordan 29. These ones, the design, I should say the shape of the mid and outsole, to me on these is absolutely fascinating. Once again, you've got articulated zoom. Right now the seam's going horizontally, which I actually do like a little bit more. But that flight plate is so thick on the inside of it. Plus, you get that flight plate which is molded as a shank, but then you also have more phylon over top of it that creates a tread bridge from the rear foot into the forefoot. And we do similar things with custom orthotics where we fill the arches of the orthotics. I think as long as maybe you stay up on the balls of your foot on these things, then yeah, I think you get kind of the best of both worlds there. I do think, like I said, this could create a little bit of instability, but can't deny how cool it looks. We have finally made it to the Air Jordan 30. The thing about the 30 is it's really similar to the 29. I mean, really in the midsole, not much different at all. It's more horizontally, like I said, separated zoom. And then, a little more of a thin tread profile there. Otherwise though, versus the 10s and the 20s on the decades, this one, not taking up too much of our time. The Air Jordan 31, in contrast to the 30, has a ton of cool Easter eggs to look at. Number one, you've got an entire bed of flyweave going all the way from the forefoot and the midfoot, and then that incorporates into leather in the rear foot, which such an interesting dichotomy there of upper styles. Then you've got a top-loaded molded shank that goes all the way from the midfoot into the forefoot, really similar to Curry brand shoes now, where it starts in the midfoot and that into the shank or plate goes all the way here into the forefoot. Bottom-loaded zoom air unit, which yeah, maybe introduce a little bit of instability because you got plastic underneath of your forefoot and then air, so not a lot of tactile sensation there. But you also have the flight speed going all the way around the shoe, so you have a little bit more containment there on the on the rear foot for sure. Big lateral flange. So yeah, looks like a simple shoe, looks much simpler than the 30, but underneath, lots to see. Told you around the beginning of the video would be seeing the Air Jordan 2 again, and here it is. The Air Jordan 32. Now for the 30th anniversary of the Air Jordan 2, the 32 took, to me, what were the best elements of the two in terms of just design, right, in terms of silhouette and look. But you also have this very, very flexible upper material. The one thing is though, is because the laces are integrated into this and it is flexible, the lockdown on these, to me, isn't the greatest thing on planet Earth because the laces have to be really, really small to get through them. Yeah, you got some big tabs here in the ankle collar, but, and it does have a very, very sharp lateral flange, so that does help with stability, but very, very elastic, we'll put it that way. Now these do have the flight speed plate, which everyone says is carbon fiber. I got through it pretty quick. I mean, honestly, does it matter what it is? It's so thick and supportive. I mean, it does such a phenomenal job, and it runs all the way from the junction of the mid and rear foot all the way into the forefoot. Gets really thick there in the midfoot and goes into the forefoot. You got a huge forefoot zoom, huge rear foot zoom. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to me is on the 32, it's harkening back to the 2 as well as what exactly is in those flight speed plates. Well, the Air Jordan 33 is different. So the Air Jordan 33 has the fast fit system where you basically just pull this tab to lock down the shoe. It works like boa closure does now. And it's actually harnessed, the actual contraption, which actually winds the lace tines up, is actually incorporated into the shank. The shank actually goes underneath of it and around it. So you actually are coming down on that. So I guess you could crack it or it could fail. The interesting thing is it comes with an ejector switch. So you just pull it like a parachute and that's what allows you out of the shoe. This is awesome. I mean, yeah, I guess you could crack it and it's a lot. I mean, as you can see cutting through it, it is a lot of material in a shoe to lock down a shoe, but come on, that is so cool. I mean, I would love an ejector pulley on all of my shoes. Come on, let's be real. The Air Jordan 34, which introduced one of my favorite pieces of shoe technology ever, the Eclipse plate. This thing's got a tread bridge that goes from the rear foot into the forefoot. Now what that allows these shoes to have is some of the best parts of full-length tread patterns as well as decoupled tread patterns. It also, when you're on the forefoot and you're in the last phase of gait, in terms of last phase of stance, when you're pushing off, it gives the shoe just a little bit more kick. It also allows you to mold that shank around your arch a little bit better while not having it take up that much room in the shoe. It gives it more flex as well as more stability. I know those things seem, counterintuitive to each other, contradictory, but in terms of the Jordan models, in terms of these ones, it is absolutely not. These also have a massive forefoot zoom area unit as well as rear foot zoom, but I mean that forefoot unit goes all the way from the midfoot into the forefoot. Yeah, in terms of shoe tech, yeah, the 34 is what, like, this is what gets me excited to do these videos, this type of stuff. Air Jordan 35. I mean, honestly, not much else to say about the 35 versus the 34, except you're starting to get more into the thin zoom in the forefoot, like more of that zoom turbo configuration. And then, yeah, the Eclipse plate gets a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact, but still doing the exact same work. Still, one of my favorite pieces of tech. Air Jordan 36. Now the 36 does not look much different than the 35, except for the entire upper being a Leno weave, which means it is ultra strong while being ultra breathable. These shoes are some of the most breathable, more maximalist shoes out there. So you're getting the best parts of the most nimble, fast shoes, but also some of the best parts of the most maximalist shoes in terms of containment. It's got an Eclipse plate in there. I mean, it's a little bit more flexible, but it is there. Then you also have top-loaded shank. They kind of integrate with each other. So technically, this is a double shank plus the tread bridge. These things also have a full-length top-loaded zoom as well as double stack in the forefoot of zoom. So you just feel incredible. I mean, these things are just moon shoes. The one thing I did notice is with these is that with the cutout of this zoom, while it also being double stacked in the forefoot, that's where you started to get a little bit of instability in these. But I think as long as you got used to these while you played in them, you probably absolutely loved them. Most people did. Air Jordan 37. The haterade was strong with the 37s, mainly because you saw people bust through the uppers of these things. And honestly, it just seemed like people did not like these. Like, just in general, these just weren't received very well. It did have a molded carbon fiber shank, which is great. You know, I mean, it's the zoom was there. Then you had contained Formula 23 in the rear foot, which was supposed to be this, new, softer, more forgiving foam. It really just felt like Cushlon 2.0 to me, but I mean, they were introducing things. But yeah, this one was, at least from what I saw in my comment sections, kind of universally just indifferent or disliked. Remember when I said you'd see the Air Jordan 21 again with the design of the uppers? Well, in comes the Air Jordan 38. Except whereas in the 21, this design was basically just rubber meshing. In the 38, they took that exact design and put plastic on it and basically made that part of the X-plate shank. And so, yeah, I mean, the X-plate was very thin and it had foam underneath of it. To me, I liked the X-plate. I thought it gave a decent amount of stability for it being a little bit more of a lightweight shank, and it was all concentrated in the forefoot. Now, these ones are made of Cushlon. You can just tell how much more plush and forgiving this foam was versus something like Phylon, and then top-loaded zoom. So, I think the Air Jordan 38 was much more well-received versus the 37s, and I loved how they took some design inspo from the 21, and that X-plate actually went into the lateral flange. So it actually bulked up the lateral flange, or I should say it reinforced it without bulking it up. So to me, the Air Jordan 38, I liked the Air Jordan 38 a lot. I know it got mixed reviews. Some people loved it, some people hated it. I was one of the ones, I think, that appreciated it for what it was. All right, Air Jordan 39. Now, the hype on these ones was at a fever pitch because of Zoom X foam. I'm finally putting PebX-based foam in a shoe. There's also bottom-loaded zoom. The one thing they did not do on these was put a shank or anything to stabilize the shoe. Yeah, it's got a little bit of very thin rubber around it, but I mean, you could just twist these things any which way. They're some of the most unstable shoes out there. They're also probably the most comfortable Air Jordan ever. I mean, these things are the most comfortable shoes. It's just that playing in them was insane. And I heard a lot of people saying, well, it's more for, I mean, don't tell me these were made for casual wear. These were made to play it. I mean, Trae Young was playing in them. They're meant to be played in. And so, yeah, I thought the tread on these things was good. I thought it grabbed really well. And I like it that we're starting to get PebX-based foams in Nike or Jordan brand shoes. But like I said, in terms of the containment of it, I just think with some small tweaks, this could have just been something so amazing. And hopefully, which we'll see in the coming years, we get that. All right, so the time has come for the Air Jordan 40. I know a lot of you have probably seen the Air Jordan 40, and it looks like a pretty basic update to the 39. And I know that I've seen a lot of disappointment about that. And frankly, I'm kind of right there with you, because at least on the decades of Jordan shoes, we've seen a few times these huge leaps, or at least sometimes we see like the 32, taking old design elements and putting it new. So I have an alternative idea for the Air Jordan 40, and this was one I designed with the help of some industrial engineers, and this is a play on the Air Jordan 4. Now, these ones incorporate my favorite Jordan design, which is the Eclipse plate, as well as something we've never seen in a Jordan, which is a completely exposed rear foot air unit. Maybe something new for Jordan brand as it gets into its 40s. But yeah, making it high top, but also harkening back to the Air Jordan 4 and the customization you get with the laces. That simple design, taking maybe some of the TPU or the rubberized mesh, just that simple mesh they had back in the 3s and 4s, and maybe using flight wire instead, updating it but the same silhouette. I also had a second design made for the 40 that I did from days and days of prompting and reiterating. I'm obviously not a drawer, so what I thought with this one is it was an internal Eclipse plate, still keeping the silhouette of the 4s up top, but like I said, updating it for modern times, a little more of a sleeker look without the peripheral air in the rear foot. That's kind of what I thought. Take what we've learned all the years in Jordan, right? All the years of the brand. Maybe on the inside you've got Zoom Strobel or you've got Zoom X, but maybe that Zoom X now, because it's braced with the Eclipse plate, you actually can use it more effectively. And so I think with what we're left here on the 40th anniversary of the Jordan line is that you've seen there's been some incredible evolution of shoe technology and things that you and me look at now and say like, oh God, that's so cool. They're doing this interesting thing. Whereas you've seen shadows of it in the Jordan line like 10, 20 years ago, right? I just don't remember it, until you actually look at them all together. A lot of the modern technology you see now was done long ago, and it was because Nike was pushing the boundaries. And I think that's where we have to get to. But like I promised, if you want to know which one I think was the #1 of all time, a shoe that incorporated leaps in technology, but not just technology for technology's sake, but also super smart design that led to just the ultimate in performance footwear, look no further than the Air Jordan 13. And to me, this was an easy choice. Yeah, it wasn't even close, at least in my mind. Although I'd love to hear what yours is, because I'm sure we'll hear a lot of different answers in the comments. But speaking of the evolution of this technology, if you want to see where it has gotten us to today, with every brand's different foam choices and all the different really interesting things that companies have now done with foam technology, from the thermoplastics and Nike Zoom X to Jet Boost to Boom Foam and everything in between to good old Cushlon and Phylon. You want to see what all those foams can do for you and which one might be the best for you, because it might not be the one you're thinking of. Check out this video right here. We deep dive into all of them to make sure that you kind of get the best information, most complete information to make the best decision for you. I'll see you in that video.